Hello everyone! I forgot to record while I was in the 8th grade classroom, so for those learning online, I'm making a video for you. So, I just want to begin by reviewing what we learned yesterday about square numbers. We find those by imagining there's a square, and we imagine it has side lengths that are equal to each other. And then we say that the result is like the area. So let's just give an example of 1. If each side length is 1, the area will be 1, right? So another way to say that is 1 with that 2 above it. That 2 above it is to the power of 2. We will say squared for anything that's the power of 2. Anything, so if you were to see like this, 11 to the power of 2, we could also say it's 11 squared, which means 11 times 11, which would be equal to 121. A lot of you know how to multiply a number by itself, but now we're getting into this area of understanding that some numbers are special because they are square numbers. So 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, and it goes on and on and on. And I want most of you to know all the way up to 100, so as in 1 through 10 squared. 10 squared is 100. So knowing all of the squared numbers between 1 and 100. So we have the square numbers. We could keep going. 5 squared, but I know that you already know them. 6 squared, 7 squared, 8 squared, 9 squared, 10 squared. But now, here was a concept that was tricky for a lot of people. When I wanted to find the square root of a number, people didn't know how they were supposed to write it. So this is something that I want you guys to understand very clearly. If I have this symbol, it means the square root. What the square root function means is basically a question saying what number will multiply by itself to become the number on the inside. So if I say 64, the square root function is asking what number will multiply by itself to become 64. Now we know that 64 is 8 times 8. So I will write down 8. Some people yesterday were putting 8 squared, but that is not how we write things. When we are trying to find out the square root of 64, do not put that little 2 up above, because 8 squared is 64, but this isn't saying 64, this is saying the square root of 64. So when we are looking at this whole thing, it's not talking about 64, it's talking about what number multiplies by itself to become 64. So it is 8, and you won't put that little 2 up above, okay? This is very important. Some people put the wrong answer for everything on the worksheet because they thought they needed to put the squared up above, and inversely, some people thought when you find 7 squared, they thought you needed to put this shape to say 49. But no, please don't put that shape. Please don't put the square root. Just put 49. Because when you do it out, 7 times 7, that is equal to 49. So we don't need to do the square root. We just put 49. Okay, so these are the ways that I want you to write square numbers and how to write the square root of numbers and how to think about square numbers and square roots. Just imagine we have whole numbers that will multiply themselves with themselves to become bigger numbers, and then you can take that bigger number and go backwards by using the square root function. Okay, so I want to add one thing, that when you take the square root of a number, normally I will be looking for the positive answer, but there are actually two answers that result from many square root functions. So if I want to find the square root of 4, for example, normally we could just say 2, but there's another number that also works, -2, because -2 times -2 will be positive 4, right? -2 times -2 equals a positive 4. This happens for most of the square numbers. There are some, okay, I can't think of any positive square roots that don't have a negative, but they might exist, so I'm not going to say that I'm 100% sure on that. But when you see the square root of 49, the answer, yes, it is 7, but it is also -7. So there's a way that we can write this that sometimes is appropriate. Most times the positive answer is all that I'm looking for, but if you want to know the full truth, you can write plus or minus 7. This is a way to say positive or -7. You just put both of them, the plus on top, the minus on bottom, plus or minus 7. So for the square root of 64, plus or minus 8, square root of 100, we could say plus or minus 10. Positive or -10. Okay, so those are just some things to keep in mind. Normally, the positive answer is enough, but I bet that IXL wants you to know that negative numbers work too, and there will be some worksheets that I have you do that you will want to put the negative numbers also. So those are squared numbers. There are other shapes rather than squares. If I start with a square, and then I add another dimension to it, it becomes a cube. 1 by 1 by 1. So rather than figuring out the area of this cube, we're finding out the volume of this cube. 1 to the third power, if we see that symbol to the third power, we can also call it cubed, because it's like we are making a cube with side lengths of this number. So side lengths of 1 in this case. So 1 cubed, 1 times 1 times 1, is equal to 1. What if I change it? What if I change it to 2? Well, then we have 2 cubed. 2 cubed equals 2 times 2 times 2. Well, I know that 2 times 2 is 4, and then 4 times 2 is 8. 8. If it helps you to kind of pair them up, that's a good way to do it. All right, we have 1 cubed, we have 2 cubed. What if I change this cube to have side lengths of 3? 3, 3, 3. Let's put it up. 3 cubed is equal to 3 times 3 times 3. And 3 times 3, we know it as 9. And then 9 times 3 is 27. So 3 cubed is 27. Okay. Now that you can can see how we do that, I'm going to write down the cube numbers between 1 and 10. You really will only need these in very specific situations. So I'm just going to give them to you. You can put them in your numeracy journal and keep them for a rainy day. Maybe we will need them later. 1 cubed, 2 cubed, 3 cubed. I'll start writing over here. 4 cubed is 64. 5 cubed is 125. 6 cubed equals, I think it's 216. Yes, it is. Okay. 7 cubed is 343. 8 cubed is 512. 9 cubed is 729. And 10 cubed, you guys can probably figure out 10 cubed before I can. I'll give you a moment. What is 10 times 10 times 10? If you are thinking that the answer is 1,000, then you are correct. All right. So these are your cubed numbers. Now, one last thing before we go. Let's try to figure out how, actually, you know what? I will leave these here. 10 cubed equals 1,000. I'm going to come over here and erase these. Give myself some area to work. Okay, so if I give you a number and you're not quite familiar with the number and you don't have it memorized what it is, and you're trying to find the square root, or you're trying to find the cube root, but let's focus on the square root for now. I'm going to give you a strategy for how you can find the cube root of a number if you don't already have it memorized and you don't have a calculator handy. So I'm going to say the square root of 196. Okay, so here's what you can start to do. If I were to see this and I didn't know what it was and I didn't have a calculator, I would start to factorize it. I would start dividing out easy numbers. I would probably start by dividing out 2. That would be very easy. 2. I'm very certain the answer is 98. 98 times 2 would be 196. Let's divide it by 2 one more time. Well, that answer is going to be 49. Right? 49 times 2 is going to be 98. Well, 49, we know what goes into that. There's only 1 times 7, or 7 times 7, and 1 times 49. So we have 7, 1, and 49. 7 is the only real factor of 49. 7, 7. Okay, so here's what I see. I see 2 2s, and I see 2 7s. And what that tells me is if I were to pair up this 2 with this 7, and this 7 with this 2, and re-multiply them together, I would have 14 times 14. Well, the definition of a square number, or a square root, is what number times itself will be that number. So the square root of 196 is going to be 14, because 14 times 14 is equal to 96. So the square root, or 196. So the square root of 196 is 14. Okay? So you would start by factorizing it until you are all done, and then you put it into pairs if they match. So if you have 2 7s, you take 1 7. If you have 2 2s, take 1 2, stick them back together until you just have 2 numbers that are identical. And that's how you find out the square root of a number. I believe that's all you will need to know in order to complete the worksheets that I posted on Google Classroom. So please, tomorrow, I want you to focus only on IXL and the worksheets posted to the Google Classroom. They will be due by Friday at midnight. That will be your work for this week. I will try to have another Google meeting tomorrow, but the way that the Chromebooks are just crashing my computer every time, sometimes it just totally turns off the computer when I try to open a Google meeting and then go to a different tab. So for now, we will try to have the Google meetings, but whenever they crash, like they did today and yesterday, we will just use a video instead. So thank you. Go ahead and get your work done. Spend your class time tomorrow working on those things. Okay, thank you.